Hello, welcome to the Stone Room for today's episode of Checking Out the Wareham Library. Today's episode features nonfiction subjects. We'll begin the episode by doing an all nonfiction book talk, and then we'll close the episode with an interview featuring Captain John Chellaboy, who recently donated some of his model ships to the Wareham Free Library for one of our displays. My first recommendation for today's book talk is Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann, which was a finalist for the National Book Award and was also named Best Book of the Year by Wall Street Journal, Time, Smithsonian, and other publications. After oil was discovered in Oklahoma during the 1920s on the Osage Indian Reservation, many of the members became very wealthy. But mysteriously, some of the Osage Indians began to be killed off. When the death toll reached 24, the FBI became involved as a young J. Edgar Hoover put Texas Ranger Tom White on the case. When the FBI finally infiltrated the region, they pieced together one of the most chilling conspiracies in American history. Our second book is Educated by Tara Westover. Born into a family of survivalists in Idaho, Westover was 17 when she first stepped foot into a classroom. Tara's family was so isolated from mainstream society that there was no one to ensure that her or her siblings received a proper education. When one of her brothers ends up going into college, Tara decided to take her own education into her hands, and she ended up graduating from Harvard and getting her PhD at Cambridge. Read this incredible memoir that has been a New York Times #1 bestseller and has been named a Best Books of the Year by 23 different media outlets. Our next read is The Innocent Man by John Grisham. In the small town of Ada, Oklahoma, Ron Williamson is predicted to be the next Mickey Mantle. But just like the Mick, he's plagued by drinking, drugs, and women. When Deborah Sue Carter, a young cocktail waitress, is found dead, the trail leads back to Williamson on flimsy evidence. The small-town hero is charged and sentenced to death in a trial that would shatter a man's life, while it would also let a true killer go free. Don't miss this well-researched novel that grips you from the first page to the last. The book has been a #1 New York Times bestseller and is currently part of a new Netflix documentary series. Here are 4 rapid-fire suggestions of nonfiction books that you can check out at the Wareham Free Library. Are you looking for a quick and easy way to prepare meals? Check out Stock the Pot, 100 slow cooker recipes, 200 variations for every appetite by Phyllis Good. Whether you're a vegan, on a gluten-free diet, or cooking for 2, this cookbook will help simplify the way you cook and put together your meals this winter. Have you ever heard of a secret pigeon messenger service used during World War II to coordinate, communicate, and gather information for use against the Nazi resistance? You can learn more about this book in Operation Columbia, The Secret Pigeon Service by Gordon Carrere. Are you interested in learning more about the Aaron Hernandez case? Check out this book, co-written by James Patterson, All-American Murder, The Rise and Fall of Aaron Hernandez. It spent 12 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. While 2019 marks 50 years since the famous moon landing, have you always been curious about some of the earlier missions to the moon? You can learn more about this in the New York Times bestselling book, Rocket Man, Apollo 8 and the Astronauts Who Made the First Mission to the Moon by Robert Kurson. Thank you, John, for joining me.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, when did you get started into building model ships and stuff like that?
Well, I started when I was 9 years old, and the first model I built was a 350th scale Titanic, and I still have the ship on display at home.
Yeah.
And I started from there. I started getting into military ships, and naturally the first one I built was the 350th scale Arizona that Tamaya company had put out, and I went from there.
Tell me about how many ships do you have on display at home? How many have you built?
Oh, God. I have well over 200 ships right now, and so I was told that I might have set a record with the Guinness Book of World Records.
Really?
And I'm going to, sometime down the line, I'm going to get a hold of Guinness Book of World Records and see if I hold the record of the most ships built by one person.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens, and that'll be interesting.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
I agree. That'd be awesome. That'd be amazing if it was true.
Yeah.
So tell me, why did you decide to donate the ships to the library? What was the motive behind that?
I wanted to stop building. See, the first ships that I built they were hand brushed, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you build the ships with hand brushed paint, you hide a lot of the detail that's on the ship. So I was introduced by a modeler of spray painting, and that's what I do now. Everything on my ships is spray painted. So the old stuff that I built, I'm going to rebuild as a new kit, and I'm just going to be spray painted. It's because when you display these ships, and I've won many awards at model shows. They want to see the detail. Okay, if you see the turrets or the superstructure that has rivets in the superstructure, well, you're going to see the rivets because the company molds the plastic.
Yeah.
They use plastic injection now.
Yeah.
It's like a needle, and they inject. They can make nets out of plastic and have the inserts, the open inserts in the nets and everything. It's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Even the mast that goes up in the ships and everything is highly detailed.
Yeah.
So when you go to paint those, you got to make sure that they're spray painted, because you don't, like when you put paint on a mast with a brush, you're covering in the holes with the paint. Now with spray paint, it doesn't do that. It sprays right through the holes, and it gets everything. Everything is spray painted, and it's important to do spray painting. And I also use Model Master glue, which has like a needle tip on it. And when you put the pieces together, say for example, I would do a piece like this, and I would hold it, and I would actually glue the ends to hold it together. And after that's dried, go on the inside and glue. What you don't want is over glue, because the judges at the shows, if they see the over glue, you lose points. Yeah. So it is a complicated hobby. Yeah. And I make sure that all my ships are done right. Yeah,
absolutely.
And they're museum quality.
Absolutely. And those are the kind of ships that you've donated to us. Those really good museum quality ships.
Museum quality, yes. And the other ships, eventually, in my will, I'm going to donate them to hopefully the Fall River Maritime Museum.
They love that.
Yes, they do.
They love
and
that.
They have an area where they have all military ships and stuff like that.
So tell me a little bit about some of the ships that are in the case. I know you've got 2 British ships, 3 battleships, and an aircraft carrier. So let's talk about the first 2 British ships, the HMS Anson and the Duke of York.
Okay, the HMS Anson and the HMS Duke of York were in the King George V battleship class, and there were 5 ships built total. The Duke of York, I believe, was the 3rd of the 5 ships, and Anson was the 4th. The HMS Howe was the last one, and she was built in like 1940. She was completed in 1943, 44, somewhere around there. Yeah. And a lot of these, King George V and the HMS Rodney are the ones that went after the Bismarck. and they did damage to the Bismarck.
So getting back to the Anson and the two British ships, yes, Duke of York. What battles did they fight in? You know?
Well, the Duke of York was responsible for sinking the German battleship called the Scharnhorst.
Which was kind of like a sister ship to the Bismarck, right?
It was almost like a sister ship, but it was built a little bit smaller. It had 14-inch guns on it instead of 15. And the sister ship to the Scharnhorst was called the Gneisenau, which was one of my favorite ships.
Yes, you mentioned.
And the Scharnhorst, I believe, is sunk right outside of Gibraltar, because the Scharnhorst was going after merchant shipping, and that's when the Duke of York caught up with the ship and started firing on the Scharnhorst.
Yep.
The Scharnhorst right now is sunk; it's upside down in the water.
Yeah.
It's also the Duke of York also brought Winston Churchill to meet with Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Back in 1941.
That was back in '41, yeah. And let's see, it was scrapped in 1957.
They were both scrapped, actually.
They were both scrapped the same year, yeah. I think they should have. They were all scrapped. I think they should have kept at least the King George V because it was the lead ship of the class, but they never did.
These things happen.
Yeah. And the Anson actually was responsible for the sinking of the battleship Tirpitz, which was sister to the Bismarck, up in Russian water, the Baltic Sea. And the ship actually was flipped upside down after the battle, and the Russians scrapped the Tirpitz. They actually took it apart right at the scene, right at where the ship sank. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's black and white pictures on the computer where you can see them.
They're just taking stuff out and scrapping.
Yeah, they were just taking what was left of the ship. And, after the bombardment from the guns and the planes, there wasn't too much left.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
So let's talk about some of the battleships that are in there. You've got the Wisconsin, you've got the North Carolina, and you've got the Missouri. Let's talk about those for a little bit.
Okay. Missouri and the Wisconsin sister ships. There was 4 of them built, and it was in the Iowa class. And the other ship was the New Jersey. Now they all have nicknames. Missouri was called the Mighty Mo.
Yep.
New Jersey was called the Big Stick.
Yep.
And the Big Cheese was the Wisconsin because they made cheese up in Wisconsin.
Of course.
Iowa, I don't know what the nickname of that ship was. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah.
And but right now, all 4 ships are in existence.
Really?
Missouri is in Pearl Harbor to mark the end of World War II, which the Japanese signed the surrender up on the poop deck of the Missouri, which was the second number 2 turret on the starboard side.
And you can still see that spot, right, when you're at Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, actually, yeah. They actually have, I think they do have a table that's on that area to show you how the surrender, how the Japanese signed the agreement and everything. And Douglas MacArthur was there. Admiral Wainwright was there. Admiral Bullhalsey followed behind. He was there, and
Nimitz.
Chester Nimitz was there. And after they signed, everything was all set. It was, the war had ended.
Yep, that's right.
Also for the Missouri, it was also in the Korean War conflict.
Yeah.
And they would see what the battleship did in World War II and also in Korea, and all battleships. Before the Marines landed, the battleships would bomb the shoreline to get it safe. So they would bomb the whole area and the Japanese would retreat. So as they're retreating, and the planes are doing their job too, they're flying over and dropping bombs. So as they're doing that, the Marines are coming in with the LSTs and going in and securing the islands, especially Iwo Jima and Okinawa and Saipan. There was another one, the island of Truk.
Yeah.
That was another big battle. And the Battle of Lady Gulf. The Wisconsin was also in the Pacific Theater.
Yep.
Was in the conflict, and also in Korea.
Yep.
And both ships, Missouri and Wisconsin, also served in Desert Storm.
Yes, they were refitted. In, I think one was in '84, one was '86.
That's right.
Refitted with missile launchers.
Yes, they were fitted with guided missiles, and they used the guided missiles against Desert Storm.
Yeah.
And was a complete success on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that accomplished a lot.
Yeah, and afterwards they decided to decommission both ships. And right now the Wisconsin is in Norfolk, Virginia as a museum ship. And like I said, the Missouri is in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, to mark the end of the World War II. The beginning of World War II it's actually docked right in front of the Arizona.
Yes, that's right. You were showing photos before.
That's right. Yeah. Because me and my father visited we went to Hawaii for a vacation. We actually saw the Arizona. We went on the memorial.
Yeah.
And it's quite eerie.
Yeah.
When you look down on the water and you see the wreckage, and you do know that the men are still down inside the ship. They cannot get to them.
Yeah.
No. So it's a grave site.
Now, the North Carolina was an important ship too. That helped protect the Enterprise.
Yes, it did. During World War II, in the Battle of Guadalcanal, the North Carolina protected the Enterprise because the Enterprise was launching planes off to get the Japanese away from Guadalcanal. And neither country wanted this island, but they were building an airstrip that threatened Australia. And the name of the airstrip, when the Americans captured the partially done airstrip, they named it Henderson Field after one of their fallen comrades in the Battle of Midway. And so when the Americans took it, they had a nighttime brawl, and the Japanese defeated the American ships. The Quincy was one of them, the Vincennes, the Astoria, all three sister ships were sunk in one day.
Nuts.
The Yorktown, Yorktown was CV-10.
Yep.
It was the second Essex class carrier built. The first one was CV-9, which was the Essex.
Yep.
And the Intrepid is number 11, and that's in New York City as a museum.
Yep.
The Yorktown right now is in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, as a museum. And a lot of these Essex class carriers, after the war, back in the 50s, they started experimenting with the ships, and they want to put an angle deck. Say they used to fly off the deck from the bow, but now they extended the side of the deck, and now I can name you some of the ships: Antietam, Oriskany, the Yorktown, the Lexington CV-16.
Yep.
They made side flight decks. Okay, so
to make it easier for a plane to go on.
That's right. It was actually used not for the propeller-driven planes, but for the jets.
Yeah.
Because the jets were so fast, they didn't need much of a runway to take off.
Yeah, because you can just.
Right. So, when the Yorktown was actually built to replace CV-5, which was sank at the Battle of Midway.
That's correct.
And the CV-5 is actually, Robert Ballard found that ship back in, I think it was 1993 or 94.
Yeah.
17,000 feet underwater.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is really deep.
And they used an unmanned sub to find it.
Yeah, incredible.
And the ship is sitting upright. It's got a 40-degree list over to the port side.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it's on the starboard side, I'm sorry. And so they decided to, when they were building the Essex class carrier, they decided to name it the Yorktown in memory of CB-5 that was sunk.
Right.
They also did the same thing to the Hornet. Hornet was CB-12, and the Hornet CB-8 sank in the Santa Cruz Islands in that invasion.
Okay.
And that was part of Guadalcanal.
Yeah. It's incredible how some of the ships that you actually built are still on display today. You know, with those,
yeah.
it's just when I was doing my research for this interview, I noticed that, and I'm just amazed that you can still see some of these ships. You know, see the, you know, of course, you know, the Wisconsin and the Missouri are been retrofitted to, you know, for today's standards, but just it's living history, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, what they do when these companies that make these model ships, they go on the computer and they look at every inch of the ship.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, there were some artists. Now these ships that I'm showing you on display, as I told you, they exist. So these companies called Tamiya, Trumpeter, Fujimi, they'll take their employees, which is their artists, they'll actually sit on the deck of the ship and they'll draw the superstructure, and after doing hundreds of drawings on the ship and what the guns look like and everything else, and they'll send all the information back to their company, and they'll start making the molds for the plastic, and it takes a while to do. I mean, there's as a matter of fact, Trumpeter right now is supposed to be coming out with the first aircraft carrier that the United States built, which was called the Langley CB-1. And it was actually, if people out there don't know what it is, the ship was actually a collier. It was like a freighter.
Yeah.
So they took the superstructure off and they built a platform, like a flat platform like this, with stilts. And that was their first. That was our first aircraft carrier. Yeah. And the Japanese sank that back in 1943.
Yeah. You know, I see you around the library a lot. You're always constantly using the great resources like the computers that we have here. You know, tell me a little about you know, coming to the library and doing that.
Well, I come to the library and use the computers because. If you want to look at something, say for example, you want to look at the North Carolina, all you have to do is just type in USS North Carolina and zap, it's right there.
That's incredible.
Now, if you were to look at the books, you would have to search in your index and find out where they are. And it takes a while to look through the books and everything, but on the computer, I go right through it, look at all the information. I love spending time on the computers.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get all kinds of information, and a lot of the stuff that happened in World War II that was supposed to be confidential, it's actually leaking out. It's coming out.
Yeah.
World War II should never be forgotten.
Yeah.
There were millions of lives lost.
Yeah.
The reason why I build the ships is because in their memory.
Yeah.
There's the ships and the men that were on. They died for our freedom in this country.
Absolutely.
And I feel that they should never be forgotten.
If you're interested in learning more about World War II, ranging from the history of the conflict, to the invasion of Europe, to the Pacific Theater, you can come here to the Nonfiction Stacks, where you can check out a book today. Thank you for joining us on checking out the Wareham Library. I hope you come down to the library to take advantage of some of our services and say hello to some of the friendly faces that you see every day.